Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The Samson Cree Nation in Alberta has a soaring violent crime rate that is hurting the community. Tonight, in the second of a three-part series, APTN's Chris Stewart talks to Shay Lauren Buffalo, who lost his 22-year-old son, Jordy Buffalo Cryer, to gun violence.
Where's our support from the chief and council to do something about all the gang violence, all the deaths, all the shootings, all the overdoses that are happening?
Shay Lauren Buffalo's son, Jordy Buffalo Cryer, was found murdered on September 9th. And other band members knew before he did.
They told me that it was him that was found in a ditch. He was wrapped up in a tarp. They wrapped him up in a tarp and they threw him in a ditch. And they left him there and he bled out.
He is still hurt that he wasn't told first.
It's supposed to be the next of kin that's supposed to be notified, and I wasn't notified, and everybody knew before I did that he passed away, and I was still at work when all this was going on, and no one even attempted to try come and see me to tell me that he was gone.
He believes that there were multiple people involved.
Only one person's been charged, and there was other people involved, and those guys, I just finished seeing a guy that was involved, and he wouldn't even look at me, and he just turned around and he left.
20-year-old Kieran Keith Lightning has been charged with second-degree murder in Jordy's death. With 4 homicides so far this year, multiple gun offenses, and over 700 assaults in the Musqueam community, Buffalo has some suggestions to help stem the increase in crimes.
Make a rehab center for sure, because everybody's addicted. Not everybody, but the majority of the band is addicted to something rather another. We need a treatment center. We need parents accountable for their child when stuff like this happens. We need people to start getting thrown off the reserve that are committing these acts of violence, and nothing's being done. They're still walking on the streets.
Tomorrow, APTN talks to Samson Cree Nation Chief Vernon Saddleback on what leadership will do to fight the violence that has made this community unsafe.
Methamphetamine is one of the problems that we have in our community right now. And so that's kind of what we're kind of focusing on within the nation, that meth is becoming a problem in our community. We met with the RCMP yesterday and they confirmed that fentanyl is coming into our community slowly, but methamphetamine definitely has a hold.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Samson Cree Nation.
The Manitoba government announced it will create healing lodges at 2 correctional facilities to give prisoners there access to cultural supports. The lodges in Brandon and the Paw will support inmate education and sobriety. Justice Minister Calvin Gertsen says the lodge will limit a prisoner's chance of reoffending.
It connects them to those who can provide support. As important as anything, it's about providing support in the facility, ensuring that individuals can get onto a different path when they leave the facilities.
The wait is almost over for an elder care home in the Listigouche First Nation in Quebec, but there's still one more hurdle: finding qualified staff to care for the English and Mi'kmaq-speaking elders in the wake of Bill 96. Amelia Fournier has more.
The Wahadesk Elder Home has been 30 years in the making. After COVID delayed construction, it now faces another unexpected hurdle: recruiting 25 English-speaking professionals, like nurses, under Quebec's more stringent language law, Bill 96.
We've pushed hard to build capacity as a community, and this law may impose something on us that really challenges the capacity we're building and the services we want to offer to our people.
Listigouche is an English and Mi'kmaq-speaking community on the Quebec side of the Quebec-New Brunswick border. Quebec requires French proficiency to get a professional certification in most cases. Chief Darcy Gray knows the hoops to jump through firsthand. Before becoming chief of Listigouche, he attended university to become a therapist.
We have recognized therapists that can't come work in Listigouche because they didn't meet the standard of Quebec, yet they meet the standard of Canada.
In order to work in Listugush without French, English-speaking workers need to live on reserve, and then their license is restricted to only practicing on First Nations or Inuit communities. They can't even live in Pointe-à-la-Croix, the town across the street from Listugush. That's been the case prior to Bill 96.
Why is it that we would be, say, protected in our little community bubble, right? That doesn't apply. So maybe I could be recognized here, as fully meeting the standard, but I walk across the street and I no longer meet that standard.
Bill 96 now requires professionals to not only prove French proficiency, but to maintain fluent French to the government standards if they wish to practice outside of English-speaking reserves. Donna Metallic, Listugush's health director, thinks this could discourage English-speaking professionals further from working in Quebec.
Before COVID, there was a shortage, and now COVID happened. So now there's a real shortage of professional people.
Bill 96 also further limits requiring English for employment and using it within the workplace. Metallic fears that this will exacerbate the lack of English documentation Listugush receives from the health ministry.
Most of the documentations that our clinical team receive now is all in French. So we do have staff here that can translate, but we have to be very careful in the translation. And it shouldn't be like that. The ministry should understand that we're an English-speaking community. There's 10 in the province. I don't know if they know that we still exist out there. We're here. We're not going to go anywhere.
She said that the health ministry needs to sit down with English-speaking First Nations to hear their concerns.
Quebec, they have France that they can go back to. We don't. We just have ourselves. And we're revitalizing our language, and it's the first language of our people. So that they should be taking that all into consideration.
Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Listugush First Nation, Quebec.
We need to break for commercials, but when we come back, we sit down with a residential school survivor and lifelong language advocate about truth and reconciliation. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's going to take even longer and more money than they thought to clean up one of the most contaminated mine sites in the country. Our reporter Charlotte Jacobs brings you this tour of the giant mine in Yellowknife.
You're looking at one of the most contaminated places in the country, and cleaning up the now defunct gold mine is on the shoulders of the federal government, a costly and necessary pursuit. Remediation of Yellowknife's giant mine will take until 2038, at least 7 years longer than initially slated.
So the last budget we had was $934 million, but that was prior to the environmental assessment. So coming out of the environmental assessment, we had to make a lot of changes to the project. So the scope has changed quite a bit. So we have just, we are just in the process of getting our budget approvals, and we should have those available in late October of this year.
Deputy Director of the Giant Mine Remediation Project, Natalie Plato, says more work means the price tag will be a lot higher than the already roughly $1 billion budgeted.
Change, like for instance, coming out of the EA, we had to form the Giant Mine Oversight Board. We had to do a health effects monitoring program. We did extensive engagement with all our rights and stakeholders. And for instance, things like originally we weren't going to fill the pits, but now based on stakeholder input, we're filling the pits. So for instance, scope changes like that.
Some of those rights and stakeholders include the traditional land users and holders, the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation and the North Slave Métis Alliance. While neither group was present on the site tour, YKDFN has funding over the next 2 years to build their case on why an apology and compensation is needed for the irreversible destruction left behind from Giant Mine. The mine was in operation from 1948 until 2004 and left behind a giant mess. Here's some of the ongoing work. These 365 sea cans hold remains of the mine's infamous roaster. It's what the project team calls the most contaminated building in Canada. The roaster was responsible for spewing arsenic trioxide into the air during the early 1950s.
So then in the roaster, the broken up rock, it was heated up to release the gold, but in the process, the arsenic is released because the rock in this area is arsenopyrite, which is naturally contains arsenic. When it's found in the rock, it's natural, it's safe, there's no issues. But when it was roasted, the arsenic was released, and then it went up the roaster stack and combined with air and formed arsenic trioxide.
Eventually, the contents of the sea cans will be dumped into a pit, buried and frozen. 237,000 tons of highly toxic arsenic trioxide will be cooled and sealed underground permanently using these thermosiphons, 858 of them to be exact. What work still needs doing? Since water cannot come into contact with the arsenic, underground water is currently pumped into this tailings pond. In the summer, it's treated and discharged into Baker Creek. That will change with the new water treatment plant set for construction in 2023. The asbestos being removed from this old town site will wind up in here, a massive non-hazardous landfill being built.
You'll see all the buildings, or the majority, all but one buildings, are the original mine buildings. So they will all be taken down and recycled or put in the non-hazardous landfill when we're done.
Labor demand will peak in 2031 with 260 full-time jobs. Charlotte Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Shirley Williams has been a lifelong advocate for Ojibwe language and culture. Her passion to be a better teacher than the ones that she had at residential school drove her to develop better resources and curriculum for her students. As part of our coverage leading up to the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation this Friday, here's Annette Francis with that story.
For close to 40 years, Shirley Williams has walked the hallways of Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, as a student, a professor, and a professor emeritus.
So I come in, I go and teach maybe a lecture in 100 or other courses, or PhD introduction. I usually come and lecture and things like that.
Williams has dedicated her life to teaching the Anishinaabe-Moan language and Anishinaabe culture. She says her father was a huge influence.
He said, I want one of my children to speak the language and culture. All the other children that we have are coming back and they don't want to speak the language, or they don't want to continue to learn about the culture. But I want one of our daughters to learn the language and culture. And I sort of understood that it meant me because I was the last one to be at home.
Although Williams went to residential school, she retained her language, something her father had prepared her for after convincing the Indian agent to keep his youngest daughter home until she was 10.
During those 3 years that I stayed home, from 7 till 10 years old, they made sure I was with my father or I was with my mother. They're all speaking in the language, and they were always teaching me about medicines or birch bark or whatever we were doing here.
In 1949, at the age of 10, she was sent 150 kilometers away from Wicomico to St. Joseph Residential School in Spanish, Ontario. She remembers arriving.
First one asked, "What's your name?" Now, I was trained to ask, to listen to what is your name, so I understood her, what she was asking me, so I was so proud to say my name is Shirley Pheasant. And then the next girl, she looked it up and checked it off, and then she went to the other girl, and she went over there, and then she checked my name, I guess, off, and then she says, "You're now number 19.
In her 6th year, she was strapped and punished without food and water for 4 days. She'd had enough and left at the age of 16 with a grade 8 education.
When you're 16, you can get out. So we used to say, I'd rather be dumb than to endure all of the things that we're enduring here.
Williams continued her education and eventually made it to Trent University for Native Studies. She remembers a cultural workshop during that time.
I don't know how that elder knew, he asked, "What is it that you always wanted to be?" And that really stuck in my mind, And on the 4th day, he went back again. He says, "You, grandmother." He said, "You wanted to be a nurse?" I thought, "Yes, I told you that." And then he says, "Your job is to nurture the minds of your people."
About 3 years after graduating, she was back to Trent.
Fred Wheatley, who was the elder for this university, was teaching the language, and he was retiring. And so they were looking for somebody who had the knowledge of language and culture. And I was encouraged to apply. I thought, well, probably never get it anyway, but I tried. And wouldn't you know, I got the job because my language. And I thought, when I got the language position, I thought, now then, I might know the language, but how do I teach it?
So she enrolled at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay to learn how to teach. After a language conference, she overheard some people talking. Then it came to her what that elder had meant.
She said, "This is what's happening with the language. It restores your being." And she was trying to explain that to the other ladies. And then I thought, oh, that's funny. I'm finding out what that meant. Your job is to nurture the minds of your people. The language restores your mentality. That is where your home is.
That's when she began to create learning resources based on what the students said they wanted.
From there, I developed the curriculum, what they said, which is the Introduction to Anishinaabe. And I wrote on it. It's been used now right across Canada.
It's been 18 years since Williams' retirement, but that doesn't mean she's taking it easy. She's still creating resources and teaching. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Peterborough.
It's a beautiful story. Well, we need to take another break, but still ahead, we'll tell you about a new play soon to hit the stage. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Well, it's harvest time, and Dave Menzies sent in this photo from his niece, Hannah, who pulled this from her garden in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. It's quite the carrot, a handful of carrot, I guess, right? We love slice of life pictures. Keep them coming to us. You can email them to share@aptn.ca and be our next photo of the day, potentially. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we've got 14-inch showers for St. John's, sunny, and 16 for Fredericton. La Grande River 13 with showers and Nukshuak, rain there as well, 10 degrees. Lots of sun for southern Quebec, Chibougamau 12 degrees, Saint-Jovite and Val-d'Or both 14. 16 and sunny for London, 14 and sunshine for North Bay. Lots of sun in the north as well, Big Trout Lake 19, Kapuskasing 16. Churchill, you're the only one up there with some showers, 20 degrees, sunshine for everybody else, including Pucktawagan and 12 degrees there. Sunny and 22 for Winnipeg, Brandon, sunshine, 26 degrees. 31 and sunny for Swift Current, 32 and sunshine expected for Estevan, 18 and sunshine for Buffalo Narrows, 21 and sunny for Meadow Lake. Mostly sunny and 10 degrees for Fort Chip, 11 and some showers expected for High Level. Mix of sun and cloud for Red Deer, 20 degrees, 26 and mostly sunny in West Medicine Hat. Campbell River, 21 and sunshine. Tofino, 17 and sunny skies. 17 and showers for Prince Rupert and Fort Nelson, rain and 15 degrees expected there. 13 and sunny for Dawson City, 14 and showers for Whitehorse. Wrigley, sunshine and 12 degrees expected, same for you in Norman Wells. Fort McPherson flurries, 2 degrees expected. Tuktoyaktuk, sunshine and 5. 1 and snow for Baker Lake, Nuyot, some flurries there, 3 degrees expected for a high. Igloolik, some flurries for you, 1 degree, -3 in Tallyoak and flurries expected there. A play based on experiences at a residential school is going on tour in BC this week. Written by the late Larry Gunno from the Niska Nation, Bunk number 7 has been 20 years in the making. APTN's Lee Wilson reports that those involved in bringing it to stage say it shares a very important message.
Like Paul said, real bad scraps happen over the littlest.
Actors in Terrace, British Columbia rehearsed for the play, Bunk number 7. So we'll be ready to go on a British Columbia tour the night before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
We live in a tumultuous time, in a time where truth is not always as it seems, and to bring a little bit of truth to Canadians' eyes is something that I am definitely passionate about and, ready to take on the stage and the road.
Written by the late Larry Gunno, Bunk number 7 is based on his real-life experience at Edmonton Indian Residential School in the 1960s. According to director Marianne Browop-Weston, the play was set to be released in Toronto more than a decade ago, but it hit major barriers after Gunno's death.
Larry passed away in 2005, very, very suddenly. So the play was put on hold for a number of years. I did a play reading tour with at-risk youth and IRS survivors in 2008 to gather information because the play wasn't completely finished.
Born in the Niska village, Gitlak-Damix, Larry Gunno is described as charismatic and driven. His sister, Kim Gunno, says their parents always talked about the importance of education, and their family was pleased when he graduated law school.
We were just so proud of him, I was just amazed at what he could do, and this is what he kept putting through to our family and to young people. You can do anything you want. Put your mind to it, focus, be prepared to sacrifice.
Kim says her brother overcame many barriers, including residential school. His time there was something he didn't talk about. She thinks this play was part of giving voice to himself and his classmates.
This play was a way for Larry to share with people what happened to them. And it was his voice. And it was the voice of the other young boys that were in that school.
Kim's husband, Dale Good, says Bunk number 7 was meant to be the first chapter of many, and that Larry Gunno wanted other survivors to add additional chapters by telling their own stories.
He said there are many chapters that have to be told, and his was only one of them, which Bunk number 7 is about. is just one chapter in thousands of what needs to be heard.
Bunk number 7 features a scene where the boys riot against the poor conditions at the school. Roll Up Weston believes the play holds a timely message after the recent discovery of unmarked graves at residential schools across Canada.
They found a way to even form a little government of their own so that they could make life better. And to tell that story in the face of all the tragedy, I think is going to be huge.
Brought to audiences by the Raven Collective, which includes Gnu's family, Bunk number 7 will start its tour at the REM Lee Theatre. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Terrace.
Well, that is all the time we have today, but a reminder, APTN will have a full day of programming on Friday, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. A special live event from Ottawa starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We will also have guests for both a pre-show and a post-show discussion on either side of that live event. And our newscast is going to start a half an hour later that day than usual to allow for a special viewing of Road to Truth, a half-hour documentary by Tina House on what's transpired since the discovery of graves in Kamloops. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.